Alrighty, how's it going, Rangers and overall hockey fans? Thank you guys so much for chiming in for a breaking news type live stream here on YouTube or wherever you get your audio podcast. If we're able to get this out on audio, I'm currently out of town. That is me, Wardy. That is Boy Steven, and this is episode 72 of Rangers Review. And yes, the Rangers have made a massive move that we need to get into. We wanted to get into it yesterday. Unfortunately, weren't able to. As you can see, like I said, I'm out of town. Steven is ready to go, though. As yes, the Rangers have acquired a big name winner, that being in a long time. Yeah, Niko Mikkola. That's why he was part of the deal, and he is important for that third pair of defense. But obviously, the bulk of the discussion today is going to be on Vladimir Tarasenko coming to the New York Rangers, a longtime friend of Artemi Panarin's. They will be rekindling that relationship on the top line together starting tonight, more than likely, in the latest Rangers game. So we're going to be sharing our raw analysis and reactions to this news, what the Rangers gave up, how we feel about this deal overall, and what is next for this team, as they are very much so going to be in the hunt to have another deep playoff run and Stanley Cup type aspirations. So a lot to get into. Very excited, though. Shout out to everyone here in the live stream. Again, my apologies if my audio isn't sounding too great. Like I said, I have to do this on my phone today because, again, for good reason, however, because of the news that came out regarding Tarasenko. So, Steven, let the folks know, what is the entire deal looking like? And then let me know, what is your raw reaction to this transpiring?
Yeah, so the Rangers acquire Vladimir Tarasenko, 50% salary retained, so his cap hit will be $3.75 million for the remainder of the season. Niko Mikkola, a Finnish defenseman, left-hander, plays a lot on the penalty kill. And they gave up a conditional first-round pick, a conditional fourth-round pick, Sammy Blais, and Hunter Skinner. Now, the conditions on the draft picks first. The first-round pick is conditional. The St. Louis Blues will receive the later of the two first-rounders we have. So whichever first rounder ends up being higher in the draft, we're keeping that one. We're keeping the better pick of the two. And then the fourth round pick is conditional. It's going to be a third round pick if the Rangers make the playoffs. Right? That's pretty much a foregone conclusion right now. So it's going to be a third round pick. And then Sammy Blais goes the other way, back to St. Louis, the same way Stephen Delisle in 2013 went back to Columbus after spending a year in New York. And then Hunter Skinner, who was a fourth round pick in 2019 at the draft in Vancouver, for where the Rangers also drafted Capo Caco, Zach Jones, and Matthew Robertson, among others. Good trade for the Rangers. I mean, the best pick you give up is a late first-round pick, and then you are able to dump the salary of Sammy Blais. And the only extra asset it's going to cost you is a third-round pick and Hunter Skinner, who on the depth chart has no real shot of making the NHL for our team. He spent time in the ECHL earlier this season. So I don't know what the story is there. I reached out to him to see if he has any comments on being traded, but maybe it's just the fact that the second player had to go the other way to make sure it balances out, the number of players under contract. But yeah, good job by Chris Drury, really. The Patrick Kane rumors, we can put those to bed now. And yeah, Tarasenko, good friend of Artemi Panarin. They're from the same draft class, 2010, although Panarin went undrafted, of course. They played at the World Juniors together in 2011, where they won gold. They've been friends ever since they were kids. Panarin attended Tarasenko's wedding. They've been very close ever since they were kids. So Panarin gets a buddy to play with on his line. And the lines that were noted in practice earlier today, also interesting there. So obviously Panarin's advantage at Tarasenko.
Whew.
Then the kid line, which makes sense. And then Kreider, Trocheck, Kravtsov together.
Yeah, very interesting.
And then Vesey, Goudreau, Gauthier. Now, Vesey, Goudreau, Gauthier is a really strong fourth line. That is a fourth line you can go into the playoffs with.
Yeah, for sure.
And then Lecision would be the extra forward as it stands now. There is some debate whether or not the kid line is the second line or the third line. I don't care that much. We have a top nine. We have a clear first line, and then we have a middle six.
Yeah, this is so good to see. I mean, we were talking last episode, right, about Patrick Kane, and I was really trying to play devil's advocate basically for why the Rangers would do that. And I'm happy that, again, while I wouldn't have minded Kane, by all means, I'm jumping for joy for them to get a Vladimir Tarasenko. Yes, he's at the age of 31 now, and yes, he's not having a phenomenal season, but neither is that entire Blues team. So I think there's something to be said there with the direction that the Craig Berube-led Blues are at this point in the season. I mean, Tarasenko, prior to this past season, was only played a total of around 30 games over a 2-year span, dealing with some significant shoulder injuries, I do believe. And he was even exposed to the Seattle Kraken, in which the Kraken decided not to pick him up. One of the big names that was out there that we actually discussed last episode too, about interesting with the Kraken and how they've went about things for their expansion. But Tarasenko, finally healthy last year, had a career high season, like 40 plus goals, 80 plus points. Now this year, 10 goals, 30 points in 40 or so games. And now he's rekindling that relationship with his longtime best friend, Artemi Panarin. And I think one thing that really stands out here is, one, it's funny how the Rangers lose Pavel Buchnevich, and they get Sammy Blais, and they give up. They get a draft pick or give up one in doing so. And it feels like it was pretty much a Tarasenko for Buchnevich trade, just like a year or so later. Like, it's kind of bizarre on how that has worked out with itself. How the Rangers get back a right wing that has a left-hand shot from St. Louis that is not Pavel Buchnevich, but Tarasenko and Mikkola, who I know you'll have a little bit to say about, who has good connections with Capo Kakko. Kakko gave him a call yesterday with excitement because they, of course, play with each other for juniors for Team Finland. They've known each other for a bit, in which they've won a championship there. So I like the little duos of friendships going on here. And for the Rangers now, let's start for a second with Mikkola. Mikkola comes into the Rangers as a 26-year-old, big, towering left-hand defenseman who will be paired on the third pair right away with Matthew Schneider. I'm sorry for the people that love the Hayeks of the world who was just put on waivers.
Excuse me, Braden Schneider.
Who did I say? Did I say
Matthew Schneider?
Oh, I don't know why I said Matthew Schneider. Shame on me. I don't know why I said that. I don't even know Matthew Schneider.
How does that name even pop into your head? That's before your time as a Ranger fan.
I don't know. I have no clue. What I do know, however,
have you watched old games from the 90s?
Have I watched old games from the 90s? Yes, but he was not on my mind, I assure you. What I will say, though, is that third pair is huge because you automatically get a defenseman. While he's not a stud by any stretch, again, can help out in the PK, not known for his point production too much, but still has some untapped potential there, potentially, especially in a different system than what he's had with the Blues so far in his career. Now to come on that third pair, yes, we're not going to see the Zach Joneses of the world, etc., but you have a guy that's clearly an upgrade over what the Rangers' current options were at that third pair, left side of the defensive position. And then when you look at the right wing, that was the gaping hole since they lost Buchnevich in the first place. So the fact that Drury sent Blais back to St. Louis, gave up a first-round pick that is not the Rangers, and gave up that fourth, the conditional picks, and a Hunter Skinner. I mean, even for rentals, this is such a win trade for the Rangers right now. Regardless of what the future is going to hold for Tarasenko in a Rangers uniform or not, this was needed for a team in a win-now stage. And you emphasized it a lot, Steven, how you expected this year's type trade deadline moves to be a lot like last year, where the Rangers acquired a lot of guys with expiring contracts that would be effective. And it seems like they've already went a little above what we expected here by landing, again, a premier name in Vladimir Tarasenko. Now, how's he going to look? Again, he's been a little bit more injury prone in this point in his career, and I'd imagine that'll continue as he gets older. However, for right now, in this Rangers win now stage, to get a Stanley Cup champ, a phenomenal player in Tarasenko, and I'm just so pumped to see him paired with Artemi Panarin. I think that this duo has more potential than maybe what Patrick Kane was going to give you. I'm not sure, but I'm just very, very happy with this deal, and it caught everybody by surprise, including myself.
Yeah, and here's the thing for me with this trade, right? Getting Tarasenko for this package is great already, but then you get Mikkola on top of that, and
yeah.
If you break the trade down, you could essentially say that we gave up a first-round pick for Tarasenko, and then Blais, Skinner, and a fourth for Mikkola.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Where Blais is basically Blais going the other way to make it work salary-wise. So you're trading a 4th-round pick and a B-level prospect for Mikkola, who's like Justin Braun last year, a rental on defense. So now we basically did the same thing as last year with Colin Braun. All we need to do now is find our Vetrano and find our Tyler Moore, and then Drury's up. But I think with how the team's constructed now, I think they already found their Tyler Mott and Jimmy Vesey. I think they're very happy with what he brings. And yeah, that shoot first mentality that Vetrano brought to the team last year, if they can find a guy for a cheap return that can bring that kind of shoot first mentality to the team, to maybe compete with others for a top 9 spot, that's going to be great. Like last season, Julien Gauthier and Dryden Hunt, they were pushed out of the lineup by the deals we made at the deadline, and that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. Depth is what gets you far in the playoffs. So my only question is, will Tarasenko be able to live up to the expectation? Yeah. Yesterday, I started a space on Twitter. We were talking about it for about a good 3 hours with a bunch of people. And the thing that stands out to me about this trade is that it's the first week of February, the first full week of February, and we're already making this trade. Which, as we saw with Vetrano last year, Vetrano was traded to the Rangers a couple of weeks before the deadline. It gives the player you acquire a little bit more time to adjust to the new surroundings, to adjust to the new line mates, to how this team is coached, the certain tactics that this team is using in game. You give Tarasenko like 3 more weeks to adjust, and hopefully that will make sure that the rust is not there when the playoffs come around. Because we saw it in the past with Martin St. Louis. Martin St. Louis had 3 points in his first 14 games as a Ranger, and people were concerned. Like, is this the guy that we gave up essentially a first, a second, and Ryan Callahan for?
I think a great example of a guy, a veteran, that was supposed to be effective yet wasn't nearly to the task was Eric Stahl. First name that pops in my mind. My father will always reference him in a discussion like this.
Of course, with Stahl, there was also the issue that he wasn't utilized properly by LNVO, but that's a discussion for another day. But yeah, you give Tarasenko 3 more weeks to adjust, to get used to his surroundings in New York. This is a move that's going to make the Rangers a serious candidate to make it to the Stanley Cup final. Now, I'm not ready to declare that we're going to win the Stanley Cup because there's a lot of ifs and buts involved. You need to stay healthy throughout the playoffs. That's always rule number 1. The team that wins the playoffs is not always the best team. It's the healthiest team. This team that goes through the playoffs without any injuries, that's usually the last team standing. So if we can get out of our division, like the Devils, without Jack Hughes for the next couple of weeks, he's week to week with an injury. If the Rangers can get home ice advantage in a series against the Devils, I like our chances. And then we get a repeat of last season in the second round, maybe against Carolina. Yeah, it's going to be interesting what's going to happen then. Let's say we get to the conference final. Who do you play them? Probably Boston. Boston is the best team in the league right now. I don't think anyone can argue with that. So we'll see if we get that far. Do we actually play Boston? That would be a really cool matchup for a conference final. Original 6 matchup in the conference final. But yeah, I don't think Drury's done. I think Drury's going to make at least one more move.
Yeah.
The fact that we acquired Tarasenko without giving up Kravtsov is shocking to me, because when it was first announced, people were asking me, what do you think the return is going to be? Because the first 30 minutes was just Tarasenko to the Rangers and nobody knew the return. And people asked me, I'm like, probably a first-round pick in Vitaly Kravtsov. That was my first guess. So to see Kravtsov still on the team and Jones still on the team and not giving up Othman or Sikora or Cooley, really great trade, but not giving up anything that could help you in the future. Like the late first-round pick, I'm okay with it. We still have a first-round pick left. I just want to go into the draft with at least one first-round pick. I said that when we traded for Lundqvist. Ideally, I want to keep both. But if you have to and you give up the later of the 2 picks for Tarasenko, I'm happy with that.
I think it's fair to say that unless Tarasenko completely flops with the Rangers, that Chris Drury has completely redeemed himself to a point where we don't need to bring up Pavel Buchnevich anymore. You know, just the entire Sammy Blais saga as is was difficult, and I feel bad. I feel bad for him too. I liked Blais when the Rangers acquired him. I just didn't like him for that price, and I think most Ranger fans could attest to that. And to see him come back, called up from the Wolfpack after scoring like 4 goals in a handful of games there. Now he goes back to St. Louis, where I hope he has a success. But it kind of see everything come full circle now, and the Rangers address this position properly in a Vladimir Tarasenko, who, as I mentioned already, I just can't emphasize enough how excited I am to see him with Panarin, because this is not something that we have seen before in a very long time. Like, is this going to bring a new fire to Tarasenko's game, right? Because we saw how he was performing with the Blues this year, which by all means wasn't terrible, but not great, especially for a guy who's similar to Panarin, is not known for his defensive upside. I mean, if you look at his advanced numbers, he's putrid defensively. He's offense or bust, have him on special teams or a 5-on-5, and that 5-on-5 game is something that he's actually lacked quite a little bit this year. So it's kind of interesting to see how is he going to fit into this Rangers team and what type of fires is going to bring out of him to go from being on a team that was so this year, mediocre for the most part in the Blues, not as consistent as they would like to be, to now coming on to a Rangers team that has all the playoff and Stanley Cup aspirations. Again, a couple of games away from being in the Stanley Cup Finals last year. So I think you not only look at the matchup that he has coming with the Rangers, utilized on that top line, thanks to Gallant, which I think is awesome, with Panarin as advantage at a start, but 2, the Stanley Cup presence he brings as well. I think that this is only going to bode well for the younger guys in this locker room. You look at that kid line especially, and I know that we're not going to talk too much on it because this is a Tarasenko and Mikkola-based show today, but we got to just shout out Filipino once more. This guy has not stopped scoring. He has made him and that entire kid line is looking better than ever. They're looking like what we saw in the playoffs last year, but then some now. Hedl is finally finding his stride. He's going to be due for a good payday, and rightfully so. But now, entering the season, Steven, we said to ourselves, if these kids can really just start to progress in their game, where we're seeing a jump by one or multiple of them, you're feeling good, even after the losses of the Cops, the Vetranos, the Tyler Motts to a lesser extent. Now you're getting that, and in doing so, you also have Vladimir Tarasenko slotted in. So, as you mentioned earlier, I do believe that they're certainly going to land at least one more piece, and I think that goes directly in hand with them getting Tarasenko, and we're not even 2 weeks into February. So that definitely helps giving Drury a good amount of time, whether he wants to make a depth acquisition. And I really think if there's one more spot to look at now, correct me if I'm wrong, it really is how Vitali looks. It's up to Vitali. If he can show his competence there on that third line, get more consistency, I mean, now he's going to have a better opportunity than ever, I feel like, with Trocheck and Kreider a bit more. And if he doesn't show up, Drury has enough time to evaluate and see if he wants to acquire another depth winger in that top 9. A Vetrano type, who's that going to be that's going to fit for the salary? Because, Steven, do you know what the salary situation currently looks like with the Rangers?
I think at the moment, if they send down Hayek, because in about an hour and 40 minutes, in 40 minutes actually, we will know if Hayek cleared waivers.
Okay.
So if he cleared waivers, they can send him down. Their cap space would then go to about 1.2 million at the deadline, according to my calculation, if they go with 22 players on the roster. So they can make a move for a player, but one of the guys that I was actually looking into before he got injured was Gustav Nyquist of the Columbus Blue Jackets. But now with the injury, that might be a little bit too risky. On the other hand, while he's injured, he can be on LTIR, so it's not a cap situation that's holding you back. And Marcus Johansson, who plays for the Washington Capitals, they're probably going to make the playoffs, so he's not an option. But yeah, for the fourth line, a guy like Nick Bukestad of the Arizona Coyotes, that's like the low key acquisition that Drury should go after. I know every Ranger fan wants Tyler Mott to come back, and look, I'll be happy if we trade for Tyler Mott every year at the deadline for a fourth round pick. With the way he plays, perfect. But if there are other players available that can have a similar impact to Tyler Mott. So I don't want to focus too much on Tyler Mott alone. A guy like Nick Bukestad, like I said, he would solidify our bottom six even more. And the other reason I still want him to go after a bottom six forward is we're only one injury away from playing Jake Leschyshyn.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yep. And you look at, God forbid, if something happens to anyone in that top six, Wayne-wise,
and also
you're already in a bigger spot.
There's no roster limit after the deadline.
That's a good point too. So I mean, it never hurts to have as much depth as humanly possible. And whether the Rangers just go out and get a Bukestad type, just someone who can fill that void and fourth line, just make things deeper than they currently are. Or again, potentially land someone that can be in that top 9 wing spot should Vitali falter. Not that I wish it on him, but we need to see more consistency from his game, and he will be the first guy to tell you, which I appreciate. It seems like he's had a really good head on his shoulders in that Ranger locker room this year versus what we saw in the early years, soon after the Rangers originally drafted him first round a couple years back now. So you look at the Rangers, how they're currently constructed, and you view them from last year. Last year, they made that miraculous run. They surprised a lot of people with those great line moves. It was so hot down the stretch. And again, just a couple of games away from the Stanley Cup final in their first year of this so-called rebuild. Now you advance to this point. They're still in a very good spot this year. Had a slow start. People were calling for Gerard Gallant's head. I mean, there were points where I was really fed up too. It was hard not to be. But now they found their structure. They found more of their game. And now by adding this type of dynamic winner in Tarasenko, Mikkola to solidify that bottom pair of defense over the Patrick Nemeths of the world. I mean, it's quite the upgrade if you view it in that standpoint from a year ago, right? Yeah. So you look at how they currently have things going entering playoffs. You feel good with the experience that they already built last year. And adding a sprinkle or two more players, you can't go wrong. So I just got to give one more shout out where it's due to Chris Drury for doing a phenomenal job overall as GM for the Rangers with type of positions and at the timing for them as well. I mean, he has been nothing short of phenomenal. From starting off with Buchnevich and Sammy Bladiel to fast forward now, it has really been miraculous what he's been able to do. Again, I get it, it's a rental. I get it that Tarasenko is a rental. I get it that Mikkola is a rental. But the fact that you didn't even give up a Vitali, who doesn't have much value right now as is, instead you give up a Sammy Blais, who has no value right now. There's only sentimental value with St. Louis because they probably feel like the only team that could get him right again because he's originally from there. Or that being in Hunter Skinner, like to give up a Hunter Skinner over any of the other potential prospects, even a Matthew Robertson, is baffling to me. So I'm not going to sit here and say this was a complete fleece job, but this was such a great win for the Rangers overall when you look at this deal for what they needed and what they were able to address with the amount of time leading up to the trade deadline. So my question for you, Steven, is do you think, let's talk hypothetical for a minute before we get into what's next for the Rangers coming up with tonight's game and the upcoming games and stuff of that nature. When you look at the Rangers right now with Tarasenko, assuming things go well, like he has a solid stint here, do you think they will be able to bring him back? Or do you think that this is something where it's simply a flash in the pan? They got him now. They're going to enjoy that. And then once he hits the open market, he's more than likely going to be out of reach.
Look, it all depends on what Tarasenko wants, right? Tarasenko is 31 years old.
Yep.
He's coming off a contract where, let me actually look up so I get the numbers right here, but his cap hit is $7.5 million, like full cap hit. So his current contract was 8 years for $60 million. His career earnings, I mean, he's earned his money. Yeah, he doesn't have to worry about that. He already has a Stanley Cup ring. So he doesn't have to go chasing a cup at age 31.
Yeah.
what if Tarasenko just really likes playing in New York, really likes playing with Panarin, who's under contract for 3 more years, and Tarasenko's like, I know your cap situation. I know that I earned my money already. I'm just going to sign a short-term contract for a decent cap hit, like 2.5 million, maybe. I'm not saying it's going to happen. A team might offer him 6 million, and he'll take it. But if there was ever a player that could take a team-friendly deal like that, it would be someone like Tarasenko, who's earned his money, who already has his ring, and that's the type of deal that you're hoping for. Like, I know it's not exactly the same situation, but if you look at the situation in Boston, they have Patrice Bergeron for 2.5 million, David Krejci for 1 million. I know these guys are 37 and 36, and they've been with the Bruins their entire career, so it's a different situation. But it does sometimes happen if players are just happy to be where they are and they already have their championship under their belt and they've already earned their money. Why would they sign somewhere else for for more money? Is it really going to make that much of a difference? So that's what I'm holding on to. I know it's still going to be a long shot, but if he's willing to sign a team friendly deal, then he'd be a really good value player for the Rangers.
Yeah, and I love, again, if there's any potential, he does seem like the type of guy who could bring that potential, knowing that he's already won a championship before. So we do have to keep into account what is his desires, right? Is this something where he is in a spot where he's still just looking for the payday, he's won his chip already, and he'll just go to the highest bidder? But again, the fact that he does have quite literally one of his best friends, like he said himself, alongside him now on this team, and a team that's going to be competitive for years and years on end, there's definitely appeal. So yeah, hopefully again he does what the Rangers hope he can do in this role for the remainder of the season, heading into postseason with the Rangers and be an X factor. And two, hopefully the Rangers treat him the way that he hopes to be treated, or this could be a relationship that goes beyond just the remainder of this 2022-2023 season. Good points by you there. So now, one more thing I did want to mention, because it was a little interesting. People are saying in the live chat for people watching on YouTube. Also, make sure to smash that like and subscribe button, guys. Greatly appreciate it. We try to come at you as much as we can. Steven has his own thing going. He's the biggest Ranger fan you will ever meet out there, all the way in Europe. He's currently residing in Ireland. I'm here in not New York, but residing in PA. And we both have separate things going on, but we try to get the pods out as much as humanly possible. So make sure to smash those buttons. It does mean a lot. But Patrick Kane's interesting because he already spoke publicly about Tarasenko going to the Rangers. And he kind of, passive aggressively, and his wording said, he's not the most excited to see it happen. It's pretty obvious, and we know this, that Kane has kind of always looked like a fit for the Rangers for a long period of time. Like, this is going beyond just this year. We've heard Rangers and Kane connections, it feels like, the majority of his career, right? So at this point in his career, he was dealing with some a nagging hip injury, which I do believe was somewhat of a factor in Drury's decision to not go for Kane, but to go for Tarasenko here. Yeah, didn't seem too pleased by the deal, but it is what it is. And again, that's all that needs to be said on that front. But just interesting comments there from Kane. Make sure to look him up if you haven't, guys. So now, Steven, two things I want to get into before we wrap things up, because this is not going to be a terribly long show. One is, how did we look from our previous predictions a week ago on the podcast? Who won the belt? Because for those that don't know, every time we do an episode, we predict the next 3-4 games or so for the Rangers up until we are scheduled to speak next, as long as our podcast timing lines up. So, Steven, why don't you tell me how it is? You have a smirk on your face, so I'm not too happy about it.
No. I was going to say, we do this every week, and you lose every week.
Thank you.
I went with 2-1-1. You went with 2-2-0. This was on Friday. So let's see. That is wait, when was this? Well, what was the last game before our previous recording?
That's a good question. I'm trying.
Oh no, we the Rangers have only played 2 games since our last recording, so we cannot do the prediction yet.
Oh, so why did we think it was going to take? Oh, I think we just predicted in thinking that we weren't going to record again until next week. That's why.
Because you were traveling, so we weren't planning on recording.
Yes, as you can see, I'm not at the setup. So,
but then Drury woke up yesterday. So
yeah, sure. Yeah.
But yeah, no, a couple of interesting things. And look, when I say interesting, I mean interesting for me. Maybe not necessarily interesting for the people listening, but when the Rangers uploaded a picture of the jerseys for today, well, first of all, Tarasenko, as expected, number 91. And then Mikkola, number 77. So he's the fourth Ranger to wear number 77. Esposito, D'Angelo, and Vetrano.
Mm-hmm.
So he's the first non-Italian to wear number 77 for the Rangers. But what stood out to me is that the jersey for Niko Mikkola was an older jersey. It's not the
current. I saw you tweet about this. I'm like, if there's anyone that's going to somehow, some way point this out, it's you.
And I actually looked into it, and I kind of did some digging. You know, I was able to find some jerseys, some that collectors have of Niko Mikkola. He wears a size 60 jersey, so that's probably the reason they didn't have a size 60 jersey from the prime green line, so that's why they went with an older one. And this happens sometimes. I said this on Twitter. Patrick Kodorenko, undrafted free agent signing by the Rangers in 2020, last September in preseason wore a jersey from 2017-18. Because sometimes they just don't have the size, so they just dig into like a box of old jerseys. They strip them, they customize it for the player that night, and it happens. The other thing that I researched today, and I was kind of curious because the birthdays of Panarin and Tarasenko, 1991,
interesting.
October and December. So Artemi Panarin is the last player born in the Soviet Union, last NHL player to be born in the Soviet Union on October 31st. On December 8th, the Soviet Union dissolved, and 5 days later, Vladimir Tarasenko was born. So the Rangers now have the last Soviet-born player and the first Russian-born player in the NHL.
That's so bizarre. Yeah, cool. That is like if you're gonna throw out a random yet interesting fact, I think that is up there. Like that's valid. Yeah. I think some viewers here will appreciate that one for sure.
If you're really into history and stuff, you're gonna love this.
Yeah.
If you don't care, that's fine too. I find it interesting, so I spent like a good 45 minutes researching to see if there were any other players born between October 31st and December 13th of that year.
Okay, so I'm sorry. I love that. So Steven, the Rangers have a hockey game tonight, and who they're playing again?
Seattle Kraken.
Seattle Kraken. And thought I do believe, isn't your fiance in attendance for tonight's game?
Yes, she's going to the game. She got tickets from the parents of one of her friends. They have season tickets. They couldn't go. So she's going to go with her mom. Now, I'm a little bit concerned because every time my fiance goes to a Rangers game with her mom, the Rangers get shut out. So if we get shut out tonight, you know who to blame.
Okay, and we're looking at you right away. Hopefully that doesn't happen. I think this is going to be a great game. Interesting too. How great would it be if Tarasenko lights the lamp a little bit when Seattle had the opportunity to acquire him because he was exposed purposely for the expansion draft. So
he was unprotected in the expansion draft, but the Kraken decided to go with Vince Dunn. Good selection though in an expansion.
Sleeper. Vince Dunn has had a very bizarre career, but he's been great now with Seattle. If you look at his overall advanced numbers, like very good.
And since we're on the subject of Tarasenko, of course, we finally rectified the Dylan McIlrath draft pick now, 13 years later, by getting Tarasenko. He's playing tonight against the player that the St. Louis Blues drafted ahead of him, though.
Oh, Schwartz.
Jaden Schwartz, yeah.
Very interesting.
And another thing about the 2010 draft, of course, a bunch of players from that draft that ended up playing for the Rangers. Ryan Spooner, Jared Tenorti, Oscar Lindberg, of course, Dylan McElrath and Jesper Fast, Christian Thomas, Emerson Edom, off the top of my head. There's a couple more that I cannot think of right now. Connor Brickley is another one.
Oh, my goodness, I remember that name. Wow, that's been a while.
Yeah. So
funny.
technically, Artemi Panarin is also a player from the 2010 draft. That was the first year he was eligible. Artemi Panarin and Vladimir Tarasenko ranked first and third in points per game in that draft class.
Wow.
Panarin's the only one over a point per game in that draft class, though.
I still can't get over Tarasenko and just how much he bounced back from his injuries. Because it felt like he was really...
He had multiple surgeries, and then he came back with an 80-plus point season.
Yeah, like multiple like major shoulder surgeries. Like this is something where, as a hockey player, when all you use is your shoulders for movement, especially whether it's checking or, of course, just using your shoulders in general as you're using the puck. Like the fact that he was able to deal with that adversity, significant ones, and have a career high season as age 30 year last year with St. Louis. It's pretty remarkable. I remember seeing him last season light up the lamp, and I'm like, oh my God, Tarasenko's back. Like, this is crazy. He was my favorite player for a good period of time there in the mid-2010s when he was first coming up with the Blues and really exposing. Like, Tarasenko, like, in a way, is kind of like how I view Pastrnak now, right? Pasta, like, especially Pasta's come up. I see those similarities a little bit. Pasta's a phenomenal player in his own right, a better player for sure for Boston. But it's just interesting seeing Vladdy now because he was one of those guys where, back in the day, you would only dream about him being a Ranger. The same way that there were years ago where you would only dream about Panarin being a Ranger. And now they're together. Like, if you, on paper, Steven, if you had to say, where does this current Rangers roster stack up in most talented Rangers history? Like, how far apart is this from the 94 Rangers, for example? Like, how many other good Ranger teams stack up with this team talent-wise on paper?
Talent-wise, that's an interesting distinction because I think this team is more talented than the 94 team, but it was also a different era. It wasn't really an era where the fourth line was expected to chip in with some goals. But look, let's be real here. Artemi Panarin, if it wasn't for the pandemic, would have two 100-point seasons as a Ranger. No player has ever had multiple 100-point seasons as a Ranger. Only reason Panarin doesn't have it is because the pandemic shortened those two seasons. But he was on pace for 113 in each of his first two seasons. Then he had 96 in what was considered a disappointing season, or 95. Imagine a player putting up 95 points and fans go, yeah, he wasn't that great. That's how good Panarin is. Putting up 95 points, fans still aren't satisfied. Then you have Zibanejad, who, look, we always knew what he could do in the regular season, but last season in the playoffs, 24 points in 20 games.
If it wasn't for him, the Rangers don't get out of that first round.
Zibanejad and Fox. And then brings me to my third player, Adam Fox. Adam Fox is on par with Brian Leetch at the same age.
He is your Norris winner right now, I would say, for sure.
Adam Fox was I think Adam Fox and Bobby Orr are the only defensemen to win a Norris Trophy in in either of the first two seasons.
Yeah, I believe you're correct. Yeah.
Subban, I think, won it in his third. Then, okay, so you've had Panarin, you've had Zibanejad, you talk about Fox. Igor Shesterkin has a Vezina Trophy already. Not as good as last year, but still a top 5 goalie in the league. And then you add to that Chris Kreider, who's on pace for 35 goals, even though it doesn't seem like it, but I looked it up, on pace for 35 goals. You'll have the kid line, which if they play like they have the last couple of weeks, they can have an impact like Brassard, Zuccarello, and Pouliot in 2014, if you remember that third line.
Yeah.
And then you have Kreider and Trocheck. You still have Kravtsov. You have Barclay Goodrow, who's basically the new Jasper Fast. He can play anywhere. He's
that's a good point. I really haven't thought about him in that Jesper role, but yes, he can play lines 1 through 4. Yeah, good comment.
And then on defense, Keandre Miller is having a really good season.
We love Key. Yep.
The only reason he doesn't have more points is that he doesn't get power play time.
Mm-hmm.
And then Jacob Trouba, who, for all his flaws, still brings a lot to the table when he's on the ice. And now the Rangers added Tarasenko. And now the Rangers added Mikkola on the third pair.
And the good thing about Mikkola, too, sorry to cut you off, is that he doesn't only have size, but he's not just a pylon out there. You know what I mean? Like, he's actually a guy who understands the defensive game of a defensive defenseman. You know, like, he's going to play his part just fine and potentially give Schneider a little bit more opportunities to succeed on the offensive front.
This team is the best team I've seen in terms of talent, in terms of potential. This is the best Rangers team I've seen, and I've been watching them since 1992. The only thing holding them back is the coach.
Yep. Agreed. And this will be a big test for Gallant, too, because it seems like Drury has done his best to make sure that the Rangers put out a roster that is at minimum on par with last year, but now you can look at is better than last year for the most part, right? Especially if they land like one more depth piece. There's no denying that with the development of the kid line, especially. So if we go down the road here and the Rangers, say, get kicked short in playoffs, it's like, who's to blame them? Because the Rangers have done their part. The players have shown their development. They've rounded things out. So this is going to be a big key for Gallant. I know that he normally doesn't finish his contracts that we've seen historically with the teams that he coaches. But again, if he gets them right and they go on another deep run and at minimum gets to the Eastern Conference Final again, then that's a thing where it's okay, how much is it actually on Gallant?
Here's the other
negative way.
Here's the other thing, because you asked the question, if we go out in the second round, who's to blame? Sometimes there's just no one to blame.
Yeah.
It all depends on how you go out.
Yeah.
If you play the Carolina Hurricanes and you put up a fight and you take it to overtime in Game 7 and you lose by some deflection, that trickles over the goal line, do you really have someone to blame?
I mean, and again, that's a special circumstance, right?
Yeah, so you can always find something that went wrong, but that goes for both teams. 2015 against Tampa, right? Ranger fans always say, "Oh, we lost because we didn't score in games 5 and 7." Okay, I see your point, but both teams scored 21 goals in that 7-game series. The number of goals was tied 21-21. You could easily argue that the Rangers lost because Henrik Lundqvist gave up 6 goals in games 2 and 3 back to back. That's 12 goals in 2 games. You could argue that that's the reason. If we win Game 7, then Tampa Bay fans are going to complain that they lost Game 6.
Yep.
You can always find something. This team, and I've always said, this team is going to enter their contention window in 2024. And I know that's a very scientific approach that I use, but from the moment you draft top 5, from the moment you make the Stanley Cup final, it's usually 5 years in the salary cap era for successful teams, at least. Looking at the most opportunistic scenarios, the blueprints to success, the Blackhawks 5 years, the Bruins 5 years, the Kings 5 years, and the Penguins 6 years. You could argue 5 years if you don't count Ryan Whitney as a 5th overall pick in 2002. Then it took them 5 years from drafting Marc-Andre Fleury 1st overall to making it to the Stanley Cup final where they lost to the Red Wings. 5 years is a very opportunistic expectation to go from a top 5 pick to making the Stanley Cup final. Look at the Tampa Bay Lightning. They drafted Hedman and Stamkos in 2008 and 2009, and they only won a cup in 2020. It took them 12 years. The Colorado Avalanche drafted what's his name, Matt Duchene, third overall in 2009. 2009. Even if you don't count that one, even if you start at Landeskog, second overall in 2011, still took him 11 years to win a cup. To even make it to a Stanley Cup final. The Avalanche never even made it to a Stanley Cup final until last year, since they've had their high draft picks. At least Tampa made it to the final in 2015, but they lost. The Capitals, they drafted Backstrom and Ovechkin. Ovechkin was drafted before the lockout in 2004, 2005.
Yep.
And they didn't win a cup until 2018. So I think 2024 is when we really can start looking at winning some cups. But if we go on a run and if we win a cup this year, hey, I'm the happiest Ranger fan alive. Like everyone who's listening to this.
Yeah.
But it would be 1 year ahead of schedule based on my calculation.
I mean, let's put it would have been 2 years ahead of schedule if they went and did the whole damn thing last year, and they weren't far. You know, it's insane to look at how that run started, and then this will get to this wrap up the show.
I'm still pissed off that we were up 2-0 in games and 2-0 in game 3. And
I know.
And then
again, it is what it is, though.
It is what it is. We lost to the Tampa Bay Lightning, which is there's no shame in that.
They were trying to go for a three-peat. It wasn't like that they were on a miraculous out of nowhere run the way that the Rangers were. Let's put it that way.
True. One more thing I'll say about this. Last year we traded for Andrew Copp. We gave up Morgan Barron, a first-round pick, and a conditional second.
Mm-hmm.
And that a second and a conditional second, because one of the second-round picks turned into a first when we made it to the Eastern Conference Final.
True.
I'm happy that there's no performance condition on one of the picks for the Rangers, aside from the fourth. If we make the playoffs, it's a third. But it's not like we're throwing another second that becomes a first if we make it to the Stanley Cup final. What we paid now, that's it. That's all we're going to give up for Tarasenko and Mikkola.
Mm-hmm.
I'm happy with that.
I'm happy with that too. And I think you look at Drury and he just did a phenomenal job once more. And I'm excited to see what other moves he may have, little tricks up his sleeve as we, again, are still a little bit away from the trade deadline, but not terribly far.
If you remove the Buchnevich trade from his resume, then Chris Drury hasn't done anything wrong as a general manager in his first 2 years.
No. And again, when you look at the success that the Rangers have since he became full-time GM, and the overall moves that have helped impact that success, there's a reason why he's deemed as, if not the best general manager in all the NHL right now, then surely a top one. What he's been able to do in such a short period of time. And again, this is where you have the likes of even Jeff Gordon to really help pave the way for him for the years that Jeff was running things. So I will always think about that. When I think of Drury's success, I know that Jeff was a factor into that as well, and that can't go unnoticed. But, Steven, I do have to wrap things up here shortly, so do you have any final remarks on the Rangers with, again, big game tonight, Tarasenko, Mikkola making their Rangers debut? We're going to see how they do. What final regards you got for me here?
We have to go over the number 72.
We do have to go over the number 72. And is there anyone besides the obvious?
There's only one.
Okay, and how fitting is it that episode 72 is revolved around the man who was hotter than the sun himself in Filipino?
In 2023, only 3 players in the NHL have scored more goals than Filipino.
So how many does he have now? 18 or 19?
Let me check. I know he has 11 in this calendar year. He has 19 in total. 19.
My good. And how many more games do the Rangers have left this season?
31. I think 31.
My prediction, I'm going to say it now. I think Hedl ends the season with 27 goals. I don't think he's going to get a 30, even though that'd be amazing. I'm going to be more on the, trying to be as rational as possible, knowing that hot streaks will come to an end.
He would need 11 goals in 31 games.
Mm-hmm.
He has 19 and 43 now.
Yeah.
Even if he dips below his average goals per game so far, he can still hit 30. I think he's going to hit 30.
And that's awesome. That's all. Again, I think how I felt with Kreids, I think I took the under for a bit too. So just trying to stay conservative here. I would love it if he if he gets 30 goals this year. I'm gonna lose my mind. He's already basically at 20, which is insane.
And look, I said it earlier. Chris Kreider, after a 52 goal season, we knew there was going to be a drop off because that was his Graves year, that was his Jonathan Chichu year. We knew there was going to be a drop off, but he's still on pace for 35 goals. That's really good. I'm really happy with what Chris Kreider is doing this season.
And I think that's exactly what we predicted entering this year. I remember saying, Kreids is probably going to drop off 30 to 35, but that's still more that's more than enough as long as, again, the kids are showing more progress. It evens out in that sense. You know what I mean? So,
yeah.
But Steven, it's been a pleasure. I was happy to get on here with you. You do have one more comment for me, so share.
One more thing.
Yeah.
On the power play, Vinny Trocheck has more goals than Kreider, Panarin, and Fox combined this year.
Wow. Interesting. I did not know that.
So, we just have to hope that even strength production picks up a little bit with this team. I think Tarasenko's going to help there. I think Tarasenko at even strength better than Kane at even strength. And I'm so happy.
It's funny because Vladdy did take quite a bit of a dip this year at 5-on-5. So you have to wonder, how's that going to change now?
And one more thing. Back in 2015, Tarasenko was interviewed while he was playing for the St. Louis Blues. And he said in the interview that he doesn't like the nickname Tank.
Yes, I'm aware of that. Yeah.
Because it's to him, it's a reference to the war. And his grandparents lived through World War II. So he doesn't feel comfortable with it. So if we could just not use Tank as a nickname.
It never even crossed my mind to use it as one for him, but now I certainly will make sure that it's not used.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the nickname is going to be Vladdy, because if there's one thing that's predictable in the NHL, it's nicknames.
Vladdy will always work.
Vladdy, Kravy, Ovi, Kuzi. And then for North American players, you just add ER. It's Stammer, Kaner, Kleiner.
Yeah. It's true how simple yet effective it is. This is the hockey way, right?
There's like two roads, and that's it. It's either A or B. That's all you get.
Yeah.
You either add a Y at the end or you add an ER. That's it.
Yeah. And that's someone said Tarasenko.
Tarasenko. By the way, his nickname in Russia is Vova.
Vova. What's that stand for?
It's just short for Vladimir. Mike is short for Michael, or Jim is short for James in English. Sasha is short for Alexander. Misha is short for Mikhail. Tema is short for Artemi. It's one of those standard things.
I like Vova, though. Maybe I'll start calling him that.
Vova, yeah.
Vova. Is that Vova?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to start calling him Vova. All right, guys, that's going to do it. Breaking news again over the past 24 hours that, Vladimir Tarasenko is a New York Ranger. Mikkola right behind him.
I forgot one more thing.
Oh, my goodness, Steven.
With Sammy Blais leaving the Rangers, he unfortunately leaves the Rangers as a record holder.
Yes, and not a good one.
No forward has played more games for this team, postseason and regular season combined, without scoring a goal. He has 54 games played. The previous record was 48, held by Hip Milks in 1931-32.
When they didn't even know how to do a forward pass back then.
So he broke a record 90 years old.
It's impressive. There's one thing you could say. Sammy Blais being a record breaker. There you go. And with that being said, that is going to conclude episode 72, the Heedle episode, Heedlemania, as I love to say, of Rangers Review. Check me out, Wardy, on social media at Twitter at WardyNYM. And of course, if you guys are a Mets fan, that's where I do the bulk of my sports coverage on WardyNYM on YouTube. That is Steven. Make sure to check him out at @Statboy_Steven on Twitter as well to get all your Rangers fixes, staying up to date with prospect, doing awesome prospect interviews, just everything you need to know about the Rangers, the ins and the outs, and of course, the most obscure statistics imaginable. Thank you guys so much for watching and listening. As always, Steven, let's go Rangers.
Let's go Rangers.